St. Louis Attorney Thomas Harvey was the lead author of a months-long investigation of St. Louis County municipal courts. Harvey says traffic stops, court fees, and fines are generating millions of dollars at the expense of people who can't afford to pay. And he says all that is fueling distrust of police and the court system.
When I do get locked up and I go to court, they want you to pay a certain fine that I cannot afford to pay. I got a family. And because I can't pay that fine, I'm forced to be locked back up. And when I don't go back to court, there's another $100 added. So there's no way I can get out of it.
Robert Williams' story is a familiar one to attorney Thomas Harvey, the founder of Arch City Defenders. His nonprofit provides legal assistance to clients who are poor.
I've seen people in court say, "I'm homeless. I've been living in Larry Rice shelter. I don't have the money." And the courts say, "We want the money." Now, at that point, you cross the line into something that's unlawful. You cross the line into something that is a debtor's prison.
In a 37-page report that's getting national attention, Arch City Defenders says that half of the municipal courts in St. Louis County engage in illegal and harmful practices. The Arch City study goes on to say, for many of the poorest citizens of the region, the municipal courts and police departments inflict a kind of low-level harassment involving traffic stops, court appearances, high fines, and the threat of jail for failure to pay. Ferguson, Florissant, and Bell Ridge are the communities singled out in the report.
Since I've been doing this work, my clients have said to me, this is not about public safety, this is about the money.
According to the study, in 2013, the second biggest source of income for Ferguson came from court fines and fees, nearly $3 million.
I was astonished at the amount of revenue that's being collected by these municipal courts. Ferguson's municipal court collects $2.7 million in revenue from traffic tickets, fines, and bond forfeitures. Now, that's not all traffic tickets, that's other court fines also. The neighboring municipality is Florissant, and they collect nearly $3 million.
Robert Williams, who lives in Troy, Missouri, has been jailed several times over the years for a 2006 traffic violation that he is still paying off.
They want their money. They want their money, and it's simple as that.
They believe they're being used as an ATM. That's exactly what they say to me. We're being used as an ATM for this town.
The Arch City study goes on to say these practices destroy the public's confidence in the justice system and create animosity in the community. Thomas Harvey, the lead author of this study, says at a time when law enforcement officials are asking the public for patience and trust, instead they're met with distrust, skepticism, and as we've seen, a lot of anger. Anger related to racial profiling statistics from the Missouri Attorney General that show Ferguson police and other local police departments stop black drivers in disproportionate numbers to white drivers.
I'm not condoning the property damage that went on, but people are mad. I'm trying to explain part of the reason people are so angry.
It gives you the most basic understanding of when people are saying they're being racially profiled, when they say they're being harassed.
Patricia Bynes, Democratic committeewoman for Ferguson Township, says the Arch City report confirms what she already knew.
I wasn't shocked because this is a problem that's been going on in North County for a very long time, but it's startling when you actually have the numbers in front of you. It cannot be denied anymore that there's a serious systemic problem here.
Systemic problems exposed in the aftermath of the Mike Brown shooting.
If Mike Brown and Officer Wilson had never come into contact that day, everything we wrote in that report would still be true.
The mayor of Ferguson says he welcomes the Department of Justice investigation, but did not respond to our story about the municipal court's report. Art Holliday, News Channel 5.
Police and protesters clash on the streets of a Midwestern city. This is not Ferguson 2014, but Cincinnati 2001. Did this city ever heal? What can we learn from the lessons of Cincinnati?
The best lesson for Ferguson at that point is to be prepared, but to be prepared in with measured response. Otherwise, this whole thing could turn into a terrible war zone.
Photojournalist Michael Keating literally wrote the book on Cincinnati's response after separate police shootings led to the deaths of 13 young African-American men.
Split second, officer draws a gun, bam, 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 dead man on the street. I kept shooting pictures.
It happened here on Race Street at the intersection of anger and frustration. There was a collision here between black protesters and an overwhelmingly white police force.
This was frustration. These were people that were just tired of feeling like they were living under the thumb of a group or a police force that didn't represent them very well.
Some had their hands in the air only because they were holding signs that read "Don't shoot," a message that would echo in Ferguson some 13 years later. In the intervening years, virtually all traces of the Cincinnati uprising have vanished. But there are echoes here too, on Race Street, in a city that remains racially divided and voluntarily segregated.
Over the long haul, what's going to help Ferguson heal is that everybody in Ferguson has got to get comfortable with talking with everybody else in Ferguson.
Longtime Cincinnati news anchor Clyde Gray says Ferguson can learn a lot from what his city did right, successfully diversifying its police force and creating a citizens' complaint authority. Now, 1 out of every 3 police officers here is African American, including the last 2 chiefs. Black and white images like this are now history.
When there's an officer-involved incident, there is someone from outside of the department looking at it, along with intra-departmental resources looking at it.
Gray still looks at Cincinnati through the lens of what happened here in 2001, and the conversation about race issues still unresolved.
You protest, okay, that's fine. But at some point in time, somebody's got to hear what you're saying in your protest. You will turn a deaf ear to the protesters, but at some point in time, you've got to listen to somebody who has an experience different than yours if you're going to be an advocate for calm and healing in that community. And that's what they need, calm and healing.
Follow some of the same blueprint that they used in Cincinnati, where you create a dialogue in the community.
When the grand jury decision comes back, whatever it is, that's going to be a pain point, and there's no way around it that I can see. But over time, as cool and calm heads assert themselves, there's got to be some conversation and some collaborative conversation in that community so this doesn't happen again. And if they manage that right, they may be able to forestall a future crisis.
A city can heal. The epicenter of the 2001 protests is now the heart of Cincinnati's urban renaissance. And now people are starting to talk with each other here on Race Street. A bullet fired by a young police officer. A bullet that ended the life of a 28-year-old man. A bullet David Klinger wishes he had fired sooner.
This man, without a doubt, was trying to murder my partner. And foolishly, I was thinking, last resort, I need to try to take the knife away. And I shouldn't have. I just should have shot him right away.
Klinger is now a criminology professor at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. In 1981, the newly minted LAPD officer shot a man who was stabbing his partner. Had the suspect run away, the laws of all 50 states would have allowed him to shoot the man in the back.
If it happened today, and I was still a police officer, and someone attacked my partner with a knife, and I believed they were going to escape, I could shoot him in the back.
What you can't do is you can't start shooting at the person running away. You can't do that, okay? A police officer can.
Washington University law professor Peter Joy says police officers have greater powers to use deadly force. But once an officer claims a shooting is justified, each state handles that differently. In Missouri,
the burden is then on the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there was no justification.
While in Illinois,
the burden remains on the police officer to prove the justification by a preponderance of the evidence. I would sure rather be the prosecutor in Illinois because I'm not going to have as great a burden of proof.
The law in Illinois, the law in Missouri basically say that the life of a police officer is more valuable than the life of the person who's trying to attack them. Otherwise, we wouldn't authorize police officers to use deadly force to protect themselves.
But the Missouri law is broader, authorizing deadly force to make an arrest when the suspect has attempted to commit any felony, or is attempting to escape with a deadly weapon, or may endanger life or inflict serious physical injury unless arrested without delay. If any one of those conditions is met, then use of deadly force by a police officer is authorized in Missouri. But I'm not in Missouri. I'm across the river in Illinois, where the difference between justifiable homicide and a prison sentence can come down to a single word: and. Illinois says an officer must reasonably believe both the deadly force is necessary to prevent escape and the person has attempted to commit a forcible felony. Someone's freedom may depend on and or.
Oh, that's right, and also someone's life. In a split second, a police officer might be making a decision based on that and or.
What Missouri is saying is that police officers don't have to retreat. They can be the aggressor.
Professor and former police officer Klinger says differences in state law are not what's guiding the finger pulling the trigger.
I've interviewed 300 police officers who've been involved in shootings, and some officers have said, I was worried about what the consequences could be before I shot. And for some officers, they didn't shoot because of that. Other officers shot despite that. But it was never an issue of, oh gee, is the burden of proof on me or is the burden of proof on the prosecution?
Does this matter if there's no indictment?
Well, I think it matters if there's no indictment only in understanding why there might not be an indictment.
This photo was widely shared on the internet with the question, why aren't the media releasing the photos of police officer Darren Wilson's injuries? Because this is not Darren Wilson. It's motocross rider Jim McNeil, and the photo was posted back in 2006. We not only found the original website, we tracked down his girlfriend who confirmed she snapped the photo. McNeil died in another motorcycle crash 3 years before the Ferguson shooting.
Once people have heard a rumor and have chosen to sort of identify with it, to believe in it, they tend to have a very difficult time letting go of it.
Barbara Mickelson co-founded Snopes.com. She spent 20 years researching urban legends, but now there's something new.
There's a proliferation and a growing proliferation of these fake news sites.
The National Report, Empire News, The Daily Current, and others quietly claim to be satire sites, but they create serious-looking, completely made-up articles known as clickbait. Fake news stories created solely for the purpose of going viral.
There will be something in these stories that pushes one's buttons, that sort of angries up the blood, that sort of offends your innate sense of right and wrong. And this, once that button is pushed, it tends to override the desire to check the information to make sure that it's accurate, and instead it sort of impels one to send it to everyone you know.
This is a perfect example of an intentionally fake news story. Note the headline, George Zimmerman arrested while visiting Ferguson. That never happened. It starts with a viral story, but how does it get spread? Like a virus, when you and I click the share button. Check out over here, more than 500,000 shares on Facebook and then 335,000 likes. Those are only the direct shares, and direct tweets, nearly 2,500. Not counting all the retweets, and then shares of shares on Facebook and email.
It is very easy for the fake news stories to get out there very quickly now, and thanks to especially social media, to be spread almost in the blink of an eye.
I was thinking about two story ideas.
Real newsrooms have a tradition of robust discussion of possible news stories.
So if we want to reach out to him, he hasn't talked to anyone yet.
There's skepticism.
I think we're making them out to be something that they're not.
And debate.
They do this all the time, and now it's a big deal, you know, then maybe.
And that's before an experienced journalist hits the streets to find out what really happened. News moves fast, but more important than speed or sensationalism are accuracy and credibility. Yet we're often competing against thousands of copies of the same false rumor.
It doesn't matter. Repetition creates truth.
It's something concerned citizens have wondered about since the day Michael Brown died. Would emails between Ferguson police and other officials shed any light on the shooting? We want an indictment! The protest? And the law enforcement and National Guard reaction. These are copies of just some of the open records requests from reporters and private citizens across the country and around the world that flooded Ferguson in the days and weeks after the shooting, many of them asking for those emails. But one stands out.
I wanted every officer's inbox to be searched.
Reporter Jason Leopold, with a new international online news channel called Vice News, filed this open records request asking for any and all emails police sent about Brown and the protests in the 5 weeks that followed. He made national headlines when he had to pay $1,200 for that search. Then, the published results? These 7 email exchanges. That's right, just 7 in more than a month.
I had assumed that all of the email boxes were searched.
But were they? When we asked, Ferguson city manager issued a statement saying the city has instructed the contractor to search all emails on the system, including deleted emails, for the keywords provided by the requester. But we started asking more questions when we discovered this report. It's from Acumen Consulting, the St. Louis-based company the city hired to do the email search. This line, describing the search process, caught our eye. Per City of Ferguson policy, it is assumed at this time that no one has violated the no email deletions policy. What's that mean? 2 computer experts we consulted called it unusual.
This does not appear to be a thorough search.
Minneapolis-based cybersecurity expert Mark Lannerman says, although the consultant may have searched for some deleted emails, the only comprehensive way to do a search is to look for deleted and purged deleted emails too. That's because even after you hit delete and clean out your trash box, they sometimes survive deep in a computer's memory. But if you check the email search contract, a section called Assumptions and Conditions reads, it is our understanding that no one has intentionally deleted or purged emails. St. Louis computer expert Vinny Troya says making an assumption like that is like putting blinders on the search.
In your professional opinion, where does this fall as being a complete search?
It isn't. As you're doing normal forensic investigative processes, the first thing you look at is deleted items.
No one knows for sure whether there were any deleted emails, but it raises the possibility that a hidden pool of them went undetected.
Before I called you, did you have any idea that there was this pool of deleted, purged emails that were never searched?
No, I did not have any idea. I'm absolutely suspicious about what was deleted in the aftermath of Michael Brown's death.
And when you read the consultant's report carefully, you discover even he thought additional searches could have been done. The consultant told the city, quote, it is possible to perform a per-computer deleted item search. Possible, but require 30 minutes per computer request. The report goes on, per our discussion regarding budget control, I have stopped the search at 5 hours and am presenting the results. That has the reporter who paid big bucks for what he thought was a complete search wondering.
I do believe there's a smoking gun out there someplace, and it's likely in someone's trash bin.
When I called you and told you about these deleted emails, how high did your blood pressure go up?
It skyrocketed. I'm outraged, and I think that the public should be as well.
When he released a mountain of grand jury evidence, the county prosecutor stressed that some witnesses couldn't keep their stories straight.
Many witnesses to the shooting of Michael Brown made statements inconsistent with other statements they made.
So we wondered, what about key witness Dorian Johnson?
He put his hands in the air.
The friend who was closest to the action when Michael Brown was shot. Records show grand jurors watched 6 interviews he did with local stations.
The squad car vehicle approaches us.
National networks.
His left arm out the window and grabbed my friend around the throat.
And with KSDK's own Farah Fazal.
I'm standing not feet away, not even inches away, an inch away from everything that's happening.
Then, records show the grand jury listened to an FBI interview of Johnson, over 2 hours long, making notes on transcripts provided by prosecutors. So, did Dorian Johnson change his story when he met with the FBI? When we started to ask that question, we made an interesting discovery. Even though McCullough released thousands of pages of evidence, Johnson's interview with the FBI is nowhere to be found. That surprised St. Louis University law professor Marcia McCormick.
And to the extent that Dorian Johnson was one of the primary witnesses suggesting that Officer Wilson might not have been justified in shooting Mr. Brown, then knowing what Mr. Johnson said earlier might help us know whether he was one of the people who gave inconsistent statements or consistent statements.
In the files McCullough's office did provide, the witnesses are numbered, all the way up to witness number 64. But there is not testimony from 64 different witnesses. In fact, only the testimony from 24 witnesses was released, even though McCullough himself stressed he was trying to be open about the grand jury process.
And the testimony of the witnesses called to the grand jury will be released at the conclusion of this statement.
But we now know that it's not all available.
We don't have the full picture.
When we asked about the missing records, McCullough's executive assistant, Ed McGee, told me everything they still had when the case was closed was released. But he added the county prosecutor's office had, quote, turned over and relinquished control of the FBI's interviews. He said the FBI specifically asked the county not to release records that are part of the ongoing federal civil rights probe. Those are not our records, McGee said. Turns out some records, clearly marked as FBI interviews, were released. Some, but not all. The U.S. Justice Department in Washington declined to comment.
Could we possibly conclude that they said, well, this stuff actually isn't really important to us, but this other stuff is, so we don't want you to release that?
It's possible. And the question that the federal government is investigating, that the Department of Justice is looking at, is a different legal question. It's not a question about whether or not Officer Wilson was justified under Missouri law in the actions that he took, but whether when he acted he knew or recklessly disregarded the constitutional rights of Mr. Brown.
Now, the missing records are not public during the federal probe, but we have requested that they be released under the Freedom of Information Act when the Justice Department completes its investigation. And more information could still surface if Michael Brown's family decides to file a civil suit.
2 weeks after releasing thousands of documents from the grand jury proceedings into the Michael Brown shooting, on Monday, the Office of the St. Louis County Prosecutor released hundreds more pages. Included were FBI interviews with 8 witnesses from the shooting. But as News Channel 5 first reported on Sunday, what was missing from the original release of documents was the FBI interview with a key witness, Dorian Johnson, who was with Michael Brown when the shooting happened. And the interview wasn't included in today's release. County Prosecutor Bob McCullough stressed when he announced the grand jury decision that some witnesses couldn't keep their stories straight.
Many witnesses to the shooting of Michael Brown made statements inconsistent with other statements they made.
We know that Dorian Johnson talked to local reporters.
He put his hands in the air.
And national reporters.
The squad car vehicle approaches us.
What we still don't know is, did he change his story when he talked to the FBI? When we asked about the missing interview, McCullough's executive assistant, Ed McGee, told us the county prosecutor's office had, quote, turned over and relinquished control of the FBI's interviews. He said that the FBI specifically asked the county not to release records that are part of the ongoing federal civil rights probe. But now, more records clearly marked as FBI interviews have been released. More, but still not all.